For 20 years, Red Skelton made millions of people laugh on TV. He acted like a joyous clown, a goofy drunk, and an innocent youngster, but the people who dealt with him recognized a different character. The dirty hour was what they dubbed it. What transpired during those private rehearsals would have ruined his career. When he died, lawyers found a part of his will that could have wiped out everything he had done. The reality behind America's most popular clown was more disturbing than anyone thought. Red Skelton was born with a great burden on his shoulders. He was born in Vincennes, Indiana, on July 18, 1913, just 2 months after his father died. Joseph Ahart, his father, used to be a clown in a circus but then became a grocer. But fate wasn't nice. He perished when a circus tent fell down, which was the world he had hoped to leave behind. Red's family was broken by that one catastrophe. They were broke, had no help, and couldn't see a way out. Ida Mae, his mother, was left to raise 4 children by herself in a house filled with sadness and despair. Their poverty was terrible. People in the area didn't simply talk about it quietly, they were very clear about it. Ida Mae was so destitute that she took whatever job she could find. She cleaned floors, ran elevators, and kept going even when it made her sick. People thought Red's family was not only poor, but also hopeless. People in town urged their girls to keep away from Red because they thought he was going nowhere. He couldn't shake those comments and looks, but instead of breaking him, they made him stronger. At the age of 7, he started working as a newsboy. He yelled headlines on the streets of Vincennes, but not because he wanted to. He did it because his family needed the money. Every coin made a difference. He looked at individuals, read their faces, and thought of ways to make them smile. He learned more from that work than he ever did in school. He didn't just sell papers, he also learned how to act. He learned that laughter caught people's attention. That lesson would stay with him forever. Then, when I was 10, something amazing happened. A well-known comedian named Ed Wynn saw him peddling newspapers outside the Pantheon Theater. Wynn bought all of Red's papers and brought him inside. He didn't just give him some money. He opened up a whole new universe. Wynn took Red behind the scenes of entertainment business. It was quick, bright, and fun. And just like that, a door opened for a boy who was destitute and had no father and no future. That one moment gave Red his dream. He ran after it aggressively. Red dropped out of school right after meeting Wynn. He didn't take it easy in show business. He dove right in and joined Doc Lewis's patent medicine show when he was 10 years old. They weren't fancy shows. They were like a touring circus and a sales pitch at the same time. Traveled across Indiana, Arkansas, Illinois, and Missouri, where he helped peddle phony remedies and made people laugh. He was a kid, but he didn't act like one. He worked like an adult every night, learning what it meant to be a performer. Red's mother once remarked that he didn't run away from home. His fate caught up with him. When Red was 14, he started working in traveling theater. He joined the John Lawrence Stock Company and was given major roles in stressful plays. He made $15 a week, which seemed like a lot of money, but something was off. Red tried really hard to seem serious, but every time he said something dramatic, the audience chuckled. He was supposed to make them cry. Instead, they thought he was humorous. The business saw it too and chose to fire him. They left him alone and underpaid in a poor hotel by the Missouri River. That could have been the end, but it wasn't. Red didn't stop trying. A few days later, he came across the Cotton Blossom, a sternwheel showboat. It was floating down the river, still holding on to the old days of fun on the river. Red got in via talking. He did everything on that boat. Like other performers of the time, they danced, sang, joked, and even donned blackface. Every night was a new test. Every group has to be won over. He learned to move quickly, work hard, and never let an audience stay quiet for long. He was saved by that boat. It also taught him more than any school ever could. Red was no longer a beginner at 15. He worked as a vaudeville performer. He had worked as a doctor, on showboats, in burlesque performances, as a blackface minstrel, and even in the circus. He became a clown like his dad. But he went much beyond. Some nights, he hosted dancing marathons from the Great Depression where couples danced for money until they fell over. He was always moving. He tried everything he could to keep going and working. Red learned on stages, intense, and under the limelight, while most kids his age were learning in classrooms. Kansas City gave him something new in 1930. It gave him Edna Stillwell. She was only 16. Working as a guide at the Pantages Theater. Edna had signed up for a dance marathon that Red was sponsoring. She didn't just dance, she won. Then she told Red that his jokes weren't funny enough. That truthfulness caught his eye. They got married a year later. Edna was more than just his wife. She was his boss, his writer, and his bodyguard. She got him a raise. She helped him get ready for his diploma. She came up with his gags. She kept writing for him even after they got divorced 13 years later. She knew his beat better than anybody else. A modest eatery gave them their biggest break. They saw people in Montreal dip donuts into coffee. That strange little habit gave me an idea. They made the Donut Dunkers sketch, which was a pantomime act in which Red exhibited numerous ways to dunk donuts. It was crazy. And that was great. People adored it. Lowe's State Theater in New York booked them in 1937. They had finally made it to the big leagues. That one drawing got Red into radio, film, and even the White House. He was asked to perform for President Roosevelt. Red quickly took over as the host of Roosevelt's birthday parties. In 1937, Red Skelton's career in show business took a big change. He had been on the vaudeville circuit for years, but one radio show that August altered everything. He did his Donut Dunkers act on the Fleischmann's Yeast Hour with Rudy Vallee. It was just a simple pantomime, yet it lit up the radio. The response was huge. There were a lot of fan letters. That year, they asked him to come back 2 more times. Suddenly, he wasn't just a performer on stage anymore. He was famous on the radio. NBC made it official in October 1938. He took over as host of Avalon Time from Red Foley. His wife, Edna, did a lot of the work behind the scenes. She was more than just a helper. She was the principal writer and creative partner for him. Red stood out because they worked well together. His voice work, personalities, and physical comedy worked remarkably well on the radio. It wasn't just the next step. Red jumped into a new realm and landed square in the heart of it. Red was ready for something bigger by 1941. The Raleigh cigarette promotion started on October 7 and quickly became popular all throughout the country. Red introduced some of his most renowned characters here. People all throughout the country were obsessed with Junior, the cruel little kid. People kept saying, "I doed it." It was used in battle headlines by newspapers. One even said, "Doolittle doed it," after the Doolittle raid. Kids adored the mascot so much that they helped pay for a bomber jet dubbed "We Did It." Clem Cattlehopper, another character, was based on a real neighbor from Indiana. Comedian Wonderful Smith, as well as Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, also joined the show. Their presence gave the play more dimension and helped develop its humor. Red was drafted into the Army in June 1944, which terminated the streak. But at that time, he had already made a lasting impact on American culture. Red's time on the big screen started in 1938, which was earlier. Having Wonderful Time was his first movie. A funny movie about a summer camp. He was on screen with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Ginger Rogers. He played Itchy Faulkner, the camp's social director who was always getting into trouble. Even though most of his scenes were removed, Red still left an impression. Critics only needed to see his timing and intensity. The movie made more over $1 million, which was more than its $966,000 budget. It wasn't a huge hit, but it did open doors. Hollywood was also noticing his distinctive antics, like the donut dunking bit. Red was a regular at MGM from then on. He was in more than 30 movies between 1938 and 1951. In 1941, Chip Ahoy put him next to Eleanor Powell and Bert Lahr. Bathing Beauty came out in 1944. It was first written for Red, but it is best known for making Esther Williams a star. He played a door-to-door salesman caught up in a murder plot in the 1948 movie The Fuller Brush Man. Bathing Beauty was notably famous because to its colorful Technicolor shots and Busby Berkeley's spectacular swimming scenes. People adored Red's characters because they mixed funny and sad moments. He had a different, warm style. Goofy and full of love. That made him one of MGM's most dependable comic actors in the 1940s. The same year that the Raleigh cigarette program started, it also starred in Whistling in the Dark. It was a big year. In 1941, he was voted the best new radio star. That was a big deal. He was up against famous people like Jack Benny and Fred Allen. What set Red apart? Was his pure sense of humor? It worked for people of all ages. There were no nasty jokes or politics, just amusing, weird characters that you could laugh at with your kids or your parents. That's what made him different. That's why he didn't leave. In March 1944, everything changed again. The Army called Red up. He was at the height of his radio career at that time. Every Tuesday night at 10:30, the Raleigh cigarette program was on. It was one of the most popular shows in the country. His sponsors didn't want to let him go. MGM didn't either. They tried to gain him a delay. It didn't work out. The last show he did was on June 6, 1944. He became Private Skelton the next day. Ozzie and Harriet's travels took up his time. One of America's most popular voices just disappeared from the airwaves. The conflict didn't make any exceptions. Red didn't get any special attention. He trained just like every other soldier. But there was a twist. People were always asking him to do things. He conducted a lot of comedy shows between training, often 12 in a day. It quickly wore him out. He wrote in his diary that he felt faint during one of the shows. He forgot sections of his performance. He tried to hide it, but the symptoms were there. He went to Italy in April 1945. In only that month, he did 41 gigs in 6 days. He was loved by soldiers. Chaplains stated he lifted people's spirits, but Red was running out of gas. His body and mind were giving up. Then it all fell apart. He lost it in Naples. They took him home quickly and put him in a military hospital. He lived there for 3 months. People never truly knew what happened. The papers were nice about it. But inside, it was unsettled. He started to stutter. He was no longer the man who could easily switch between roles. He saw a soldier in the hospital who wouldn't talk one day. Red tried to make him laugh. That little moment helped him begin to heal. But the scars stayed. He was officially let go in September 1945. Later, he quipped that he was the only famous person who went in and came out as a private. But it wasn't simply a joke. Red didn't choose the easy way. He didn't want a desk job or a condo in Hollywood. He chose the hard path, and it made him a different person. The breakdown has long-lasting ramifications. The stammer stayed. The agony stayed too. On September 24, he signed his discharge papers. The battle chapter was over, but something had changed inside him for good. Red didn't waste any time, though. He was back on the air on December 4, 1945, just 10 weeks after leaving the Army. The Raleigh cigarette program came back, and supporters were quite happy. But those who knew him well could tell the difference. Red was still amusing and snappy, but there was something deeper below. He didn't laugh as much off stage. He pulled away more regularly. His new characters were more complex. They were like someone who had been through something. Not only did Red Skelton Show fill a time slot when it initially aired on NBC on September 30, 1951, but it also blew up on TV. Red was a big name on radio and in movies, and millions of people were excited to see how he would do on TV. Thanks to a new technology called the coaxial cable, which let people across the US see the transmission at the same time, the country watched live as his familiar comedy sprang to life again. In the first episode, two invisible hands pulled Red off the stage at the end of his speech. It was a funny part, but it hurt people for real, so he had to stop doing it. That event had a huge effect, though. The show was in fourth place by the end of its first season. Throughout all networks. He won Best Comedian and his show won Best Comedy at the 1952 Emmy Awards, beating Milton Berle, who had always been the best. It was the beginning of something big. Red Skelton would change the way Americans laughed for the next 20 years. Red transferred his show to CBS in 1954. That was a clever move. CBS offered him more time on the air and more flexibility. By 1962, the show had grown to an hour long and was a regular fixture of Tuesday nights for families all around the country. For almost 20 years, it was in the top 20. It even reached number 2 in the national ratings in the middle of the 1960s. Red didn't simply do well in comedy, he also pushed the limits of technology. He funded for color broadcasts himself from 1955 to 1960, even though CBS was still hesitant to go over. The show was a hit, but CBS pulled it off the air in 1970. Not because of the ratings, which were still good, but because they wanted to reach a younger audience. The people that watched Red were older. That didn't go with the network's new plan. Both fans and people in the business were shocked by the cancellation. It was a chilling reminder that even great people can be forgotten. One of Red's favorite characters showed up early in the show's existence. He made Freddy the freeloader in 1952. Freddy was a quiet clown who lived in a cabin. He usually smiled, even though he didn't have much. He was based on Red's memories of his father, who had been a clown in a circus before he died. Red put a lot of love into Freddy. It wasn't just a character, it was who he was. Freddy never said anything. Even when things appeared bad, he thought something good was coming. Red once remarked that Freddy was the most pure of all his works. The silent spot, where Freddy didn't talk, became a regular part of the show. Red told complete stories without saying a word by using his face, hands, and actions. Years after Red's main show ended, Freddy had his own HBO special in 1981. It showed that people still cared about the character. Red provided people more than just laughs through Freddy. He gave them faith. But Red's life took a terrible turn behind the scenes. Richard, his son, died of leukemia on May 10, 1958, only 10 days before his 10th birthday. It broke the Skelton family. Richard didn't even know how bad he was. Red and Georgia tried to keep him from knowing the truth, but his small body couldn't handle the constant blood transfusions. Richard asked his father for one last favor in his last hours. He had an 4 in his leg and bruises all over his body. He asked, "Daddy, will you get Mama that red blanket for Mother's Day?" It wasn't for him. It was for his mom. He spoke those things just before he went into a coma. He died at 8:36 p.m. Red and Georgia stayed with him in the hospital room for more than an hour, where he was surrounded by his toys and the plush dog he had loved since he was 6. Georgia added later that she had been able to hold back her tears until then. When she came to see Richard, he told her not to cry. She eventually let it all out that night. Red brought a Sears catalog to the hospital on Richard's last full day. He assured Richard that he could have everything he wanted for his birthday. The boy picked out camping gear, a tent, and that crimson blanket. But the blanket wasn't for him. It was for his mom. He also indicated he didn't want a large party, he just wanted to have a barbecue with some pals. He thought of other people even when he was dying. The crimson blanket became a sign of his devotion. It stayed with Georgia until the end of her life. The moment showed all about Richard and what he meant to his parents. Red couldn't bear to go into Richard's room after he died. He didn't change it at all. The toys stayed behind. The bag that was full stayed. He often sat in there by himself, slowly getting depressed. The sadness didn't remain hidden for long. It started to show up in his job and his marriage. Red and Georgia stopped being friends. Because of Richard, they had stayed together. After he left, their sadness drove them apart. In the end, their marriage ended. Red's jokes started to change. He still did his job, but it was clear that he was upset. The room turned into a shrine. It kept all the memories he couldn't talk about. The clown may cry there. A lot of admirers didn't know that Red was also a serious artist. He started at 5, going on the road with his mother as she worked in the circus. After his father, who was a clown, died before Red was born, the circus became his whole universe. Red painted clowns, some of whom were happy and some of them were sad. These weren't just random bits. They were linked to the roles he had portrayed, like Freddy. In the 1980s, each of his paintings sold for more than $80,000. His lithographs brought in millions of dollars every year. Some art experts think he made more money from painting than from TV. People all throughout the world bought his work and put it in their own collections. It was a second job that almost no one saw coming. But it had always been there, just below the surface. Red had one more secret. He never drank, although he was well known for playing intoxicated people on stage. His Guzzler's Gin comedy was a big part of his start on TV. People thought he had drunk alcohol before. No, he didn't. In fact, it made him sick. He couldn't even drink it, but it didn't stop him from getting better at it. He learned by witnessing real drunks on the street when he was a young man in vaudeville. He was able to copy their slurred speech, unsteady walks, and random movements with amazing accuracy. None of it was real, it was all a show. His act fooled millions of people, which showed how talented he really was. The man backstage didn't always look like the nice clown in the picture. Red regularly made dirty jokes and crazy sarcastic comments during rehearsals with Martha Raye and other friends. The team talked about these private sessions for years. Others called it the dirty hour with Red Skelton. He talked about everything, including things he wouldn't normally talk about on TV. Lothian, his third wife, reportedly stated that Red had a space in his mind just for jokes that others weren't intended to get. It was like a valve for pressure. He showed the public one side of himself, but he also needed to laugh alone. Red Skelton lit up American TV for almost 20 years, even though it was darker. For most of those years, his show was in the top 10. It ranked number 7 on CBS for its last season. But none of it was important in 1970. The Red Skelton Show was still canceled by CBS. It wasn't because of the ratings. It wasn't about how well you did. It was all about how things looked. The network opted to stop working with anything it thought was too old or too rural. People started calling this move the Rural Purge. They got go of Skelton, the Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and Mayberry RFD all at once. CBS President Fred Silverman didn't flinch. He wanted people in cities who were younger. The ratings didn't mean anything. The legacy didn't matter. The audience's loyalty didn't mean anything. This harsh change in TV history took away shows that families loved and replaced them with more adult shows like All in the Family and Moss H. There were millions of faithful followers who were left behind. One of them was Red Skelton. He was not simply sad, he was heartbroken. He was in Las Vegas for a show when he received the news. He said, "My heart is broken." His show was in the top 10 for 17 of the 20 years he was on TV. But CBS didn't care. They didn't look at years of service, they looked at numbers on a demographic sheet. Red's wife Lothian said that he never really got over that betrayal. He thought the industry he helped build had thrown him away. He kept performing even after the show was canceled. He played up to 70 live gigs a year, but the pain of being thrown away never went away. He told Lothian, "I'm mad that they didn't get that I still had something to give." In 1970, NBC tried to get him to come back for one more season, but they altered everything. The show went from an hour to half an hour. It went from Tuesday nights to Monday nights. The set got dark and cold. They added a group of young actors that messed up the flow. People who watched could tell the difference. What used to feel natural now felt strained. The ratings fell a lot. It didn't even make the top 30. NBC pulled the show in the spring of 1971. The day when Red Skelton was on TV every week came to an end. The show wasn't the only thing that failed. He couldn't make the connection with the crowd again. Red stood his ground even as the world of comedy altered. He never gave in to rudeness. He didn't want to add cursing or shock to his act. He remarked, "I'm not going to read what they can read on bathroom walls to my audience and their mothers, fathers, children, and grandchildren." Red kept making clean jokes even though other comics changed. Some people thought he was old-fashioned, but he didn't care. He should have respected his audience. He kept playing on stage. He went on tour to colleges, clubs, and charity events. People still came, still laughed, and still adored him. He showed that comedy that is good for you can nonetheless work. He never changed to fit in with the times. He fought for what he thought was right. Then something shocking happened that no one saw coming. 13 of his previous authors sued him in 1980. They learned that Red had put a condition in his will. When he died, all of the tapes of the Red Skelton Show should have been thrown away. If done, that would mean no reruns, no syndication, and no money for the writers. It would wipe out decades of labor. Red stated he composed it during a bad period when he thought the business had turned its back on him, but the outcry made him change his mind. Later, he asked, "Would you burn the only monument you've built in more than 20 years?" In the end, he let certain episodes stay. His change of heart spared his legacy and protected the writer's work, but the episode showed how much suffering he was still in. Red Skelton's life outside of work was just as sad. Georgia Davis, his ex-wife, killed herself on May 10, 1976. She shot it. She did it in the backyard of her house in Rancho Mirage, California. It wasn't a coincidence that the date was set. It was the day that their son Richard died. Richard died of leukemia when he was only 10 years old in 1958. Georgia never got over it. She fought against sadness and drinking. Their marriage didn't last. In 1971, they got a divorce. In Las Vegas, 10 years earlier, in 1966, she had been shot in the chest with a .38. That was also shrouded in mystery. After she died, she didn't perform for more than 10 years. He stepped back from the spotlight. The sadness took over him. Red got married again in 1973. His new wife, Lothian Toland, was the daughter of the famous cinematographer Greg Toland. Red was 60 years old. She was 36 years old. They went to a ranch in Anza, California, where everything was calm. They took care of bonsai trees and raised horses. They stayed away from Hollywood. They stayed away from the noise. Lothian brought him serenity. Every day, Red wrote her letters. She kept them, and some of them she found after he died. She stayed out of the public glare, but she worked to keep his memory alive. She made sure that Red's work will always be remembered. Red never ceased having fun, even without TV. He did about 70 gigs a year. Colleges, casinos, and Carnegie Hall. He went to places where people would laugh. He also began to paint. He paid attention to clowns. They were very popular with collectors. A few paintings went for more than $80,000. His art made him as much as $2.5 million a year. But the anguish never went away behind the scenes. The sadness never went away. He put it into his job. He earned every grin he gave the crowd by going through hard times. Red Skelton has passed away. On the 17th of September, 1997. Was 84. Pneumonia was what caused it. He died at the Eisenhower Medical Center in Rancho Mirage. His last years were calm, but he didn't do nothing. He painted, acted, and worked, but he never really got over losing Georgia or his son. Friends stated he never got all of his happiness back. His clown paintings were generally cheerful on the outside, but they had something deeper behind. They were pictures of a man who lived to make people laugh yet was sad on the inside. The Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy debuted in Vincennes, Indiana, Red's hometown, in 2013. July 18th would have been his 100th birthday. It is on the Vincennes University campus. It's not only a museum. It has his screenplays, costumes, rare video, more than 200 drawings, and even things that Lothian gave to it. The museum also holds events like the Laughter Film Festival and the America's Clown Award. The Indiana Historical Society now owns the Red Skelton Research Archive. It has thousands of scripts, pictures, and musical scores. All of these things work together to keep Red's memory alive. People still remember the characters Red made. The Mean Whittle Kid, Freddy the Freeloader, and Clem Kettledhopper. These weren't just jokes. They had a lot of heart. They were alive. His characters become a part of American life. His manner influenced humor, and Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, and others looked up to him as a role model. For 20 years, The Red Skelton Show was on. It won a lot of Emmys. It became a part of many houses across the country. His art still has an impact on entertainment today. His laughter is still there. His memory lives on.